Welcome back, everybody. Today we have another cuckoo clock to work on, and yes, GW. Well, hold on a minute. Okay, this was a GW Finds that I got this from, and they didn't package this very well. And I will admit I got a good price on the clock, but just the same, that doesn't mean they should not package it properly. Anyway, let me show you the clock and possibly show you the pieces that have been broke off. So here's the clock, and you can see all the packaging that they put in, which was nothing technically speaking, and the weights are able to beat around. Now I will admit that the clock happened to come out safely, even with the weight being able to beat around. Here on Facebook, I belong to this group, Mark, in which I introduce him or show him off on the end of the video if you're interested in looking at some of his videos, which are quite informational as he talks about some of his clocks and shows how he works on them. But in this group here, I happen to mention that I had this clock, and I can scroll down, and here's one of them that he posted. I do believe this is just the movement only. This is another post on this type of a clock. Of course, mine's a little different. I don't know if you consider it a newer one. Not sure how old these are. I would say mine's newer, but it has the same people on here. See, my movement doesn't look like that, so I'd say this is an older one. Mine's regular, I do believe. And from the same group, this is another clock that someone had. This is July 29th. This one says it was sold for $900. Or more than likely, it's not listed anymore. So this is the clock. It's got the cuckoo bird. And so far, this is the only thing that got broke off that's here, so it's not too bad. Surprisingly, with the weights beating around in here, more didn't get broke off. What makes this clock very unusual and expensive to be able to find one anyway are the swingers. These go to the pendulum, and it's this part here that really makes it unusual. There you'd turn the nut in order to speed up or slow down the clock, and these swing back and forth. This is of course the lady, and this is the man. Oops, almost lost that baby. And down here is where each of those hook up and swing back and forth. As usual, the chains are mangled in here, which the chains are no big deal because they're not going to hurt anything usually. It's the idea of the weights that are beating around inside there. These are a 420 gram weight, and with two of these bouncing around, depending how far it has to be shipped, can you imagine the damage it could have done just flying around in here with no packaging? That's where I have a problem. Anyway, it's got the back door with the gong. And inside here, the number on this movement says 2577. So this movement, and more than likely the clock, was built in 1977. The 25 tells you it's a 1-day clock. We got a broken bellow, which is no big deal. It's just a paper bellow. I don't even think it's leather. It could have been. I'll use Tyvek to fix that. And right here's a pendulum that swings. I don't know if you can see that or not. This goes up and down. That's what makes them swing back and forth. You'll be able to see better when I take the bellows out and whatnot. I don't even know if this clock cuckoos. I guess I should try a little bit of a test. Okay, well, it tried to cuckoo. It was already kind of preset. Here, there's a lever in there I can push and this doesn't have music, but we can see if it ticks, I guess. So what I might do on this clock, instead of tearing it down all the way, I'm going to go ahead and take it out of here, because you should oil each one of these pivots and also oil the other side too, because it doesn't do any good to oil just one side. But we're going to take these bellow off for sure, or the whistle boxes, and repair those bellows while we're in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the nut off and take the hands off. The hour hand is just wedged on there, so you just twist it off after you get this minute hand off. It's on there good. I'm going to add a drop of clock oil on there, and usually after a few seconds you can get it off. So that I can't get that nut off even after a few seconds, I'm just going to leave it for now. It's time to get the whistle box out, and I discovered something which is a horror to all of us. There's one nail and nothing else. That's telling me these are glued in. What I normally do is I'll get the putty knife. I like the smaller one, but I can't find it right now. And what I do is I'll put it in behind here, and what you're going to do is you're going to start working it, trying to get behind it, and you pry a little bit, and you work it back and forth and pry a little bit, and eventually it'll come off. Sometimes, if you're careful, you can use a hammer to try to get that down there a little bit better. Don't get too carried away. You gotta remember there's a nail behind there. These should have never been glued in. So you got your box out. This might prove to be a little difficult. I think I can go ahead and just push these wires down, for the pendulum to release these. Still not wanting to come out, we'll say. So what I'll do is I'll straighten the wire on the end of here, so it'll be much easier to get in and out. And I don't know if the wires are the same or not, but for now you can keep your wires together with the whistle box. Once I get the other one out, I'll measure it, and if they're the same, I won't really care. Otherwise, you do want to keep these together where they're supposed to be. And this one's never been taken out, so that's probably never been cleaned or anything. And so what I'm going to do is, with the pen, I'm going to mark that this one came off. I'm going to say the left side because that's what we're looking at. I mean the right side, excuse me. On this side, I just took my putty knife and I started on the bottom and gave it a few pops, and it popped right off. So there's a chance if I did it on the bottom on that one, it would have done the same thing. I already got the wire L-shaped, we'll say there. See if we can get this out of here. And when I rebuild these, I'm going to rebuild both of them, both these bellows, because I'm sure this one's not too far along before it's going to want to break also, and you might as well make them even. I'm going to say that's leather. And the wire's shorter on the left side than what the right side was. So this is the first nut on the hands that I've had such a problem with. Oiling it wasn't working. I've used, and you can see the scars on here, the grip pliers, and they kept sliding off. And so I finally, as you can see this here, I decided to use my hot glue gun, just the tip of it, to heat this up enough to hopefully get that oil and whatnot to soak in. Finally, it came loose. This here was cracked. I already put super glue on this, and then I used a little bit of baking powder across there to try to strengthen it up. Feels like the washer released, because when I lift on the hand too much, this whole thing comes up. So we'll look at that too. These are really smoked, so whether this came out of a smoker's house or not, I don't know. They could have even had a wood stove or too close to the kitchen. I already got the chains removed, so all I have to do is take those 4 screws out, and we'll be able to find out whether this just needs oiled or not. Got the 4 screws out. You gotta be kind of careful because of the bird and these pendulums. We don't want to bend them up. And now this will give you a better idea of what these things are. Like I say, these wires belong inside here, so that way this will swing forward, this swings backwards, and then as they change, they move back and forth as they're swinging, and that's what makes this thing tick back and forth. So like I say, this actually looks pretty good. It needs to be blown out. This here is actually still in place and looks good. I'm going to go ahead and pull these off so I can get to the pivots and oil them, and then I'll put them back on. So we have to take that E-clip off there. And our washer that holds it all on there holds this gear down and holds the snail down. And we'll take the E-clip off of here. This is where, when the clock, the 2-star down below all of this is triggered, this will drop all the way down here to tell the clock how many times the cuckoo, and that means this whole rod here will drop down, and that's where the Pac-Man comes into place, where he starts spinning around and slowly popping these up one at a time. Of course, this here, there we go. So when it triggers, like I say, there it is, ready to start cuckooing. And it'll go to each one of these. Each one of these counts as a cuckoo, and the last cuckoo, it'll drop down. This will drop down here, and that's what shuts the wheels off that has the warning pin. Warning pins, they get stopped by levers that go into the clock. One's to set the clock to get it ready to cuckoo. There's another one down here that once it's moved, it will allow the clock then to keep chiming until this drops down here, which will cause this lever here to drop in front of the warning pin and stop it. And you notice where that is. Should normally pay attention, so because you need the distance between these two plates here by the time this is ready to start cuckooing. I don't know if it's ready. Yep. Well, maybe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And just running this, I can tell by the sound of it, it does need oiled. So we got that off. That one's off. We're going to take this one off first, I think. And you don't need to take this one off. There's nothing underneath there. You got your two places here to oil. So I'm going to go ahead and get this oiled up. I'm going to be moving these out of the way so I can see where each of these are. And it also helps sometimes to look at your gears themselves and see where they go through the plate. And that way, oh, I got one in behind, for example, in behind this one. That'll be easier just to come down this way to get. I'm going to put a drop of oil on there, but you don't want to leave a pile of oil. If you do get too much oil on there, take a tissue and dab it off of there, because a glob of oil is just going to stain your frame, and it also attracts dust. Okay, I got it all oiled up. These here pendulums were a little bit rusty, so I took my reddish brown colored, I think it's called a Scotch Brite, I don't know. Anyway, I took it and I just rubbed them clean, didn't get too carried away. We have all this back on. I couldn't find dust. I couldn't find my can of air spray, so I just blew it out because it wasn't that bad. It's usually best to blow them out with a higher pressure than your moist air coming out of your mouth. But we got her done, and so got these back on, and so I plan on putting this back into the clock, and then I'm going to rebuild the bellows. So before I glue that rail on, it's easier, just take a paintbrush and dust this whole thing off the best you can. And normally when I dust my clocks in the house, I have the vacuum running and have the vacuum hose close, and I still use a paintbrush to dust off everything because you can't get in to actually dust some things. Up here where the cuckoo bird is, look at that dust. And how are you actually going to get in there to dust that? And I'll take it outside to do the roof because that's the worst. And then I'd like to wax this, but I'm not going to wax it until I get this glued on and let it dry. In the bellow, this is my Tyvek paper. I folded it in half so I can have a line to cut it in half. And this is kind of nice because it pretty much already gives me the size I need so the bellow can open up far enough. Yes, my sheet's dirty. Dirty clocks, that's all I can say. Anyway, need an ink pen. And what I do is I want the start of this paper, I want to overlap just a little bit this way. And so what I do is I'll measure that little bit of overlap. Then I come up, and right there is where I'm going to mark it, because that's where I want to start this when I start gluing it. And you can see that's all the more paper I need. And so this here is surplus, so it's not going to make any difference in so many words. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a hinge out of the surplus. So you want it about as long as what this is. Now before I do anything with this, I need to take the razor blade knife and cut off all this, the extra glue. All this I need clean wood. And I'll also do it to the top. And I'm also going to take this out, because what I do there is I'm going to mark straight above it. So once this paper is covering this, I'll know to start pushing this back until I can find the hole and push it back where it was. And that's the only thing that's on this one. On the other one, it's got this, plus it has the wire that lifts the cuckoo bird, and I'll mark both those the same way also. So I put the whistle boxes in, and I put a screw in and a nail like they should be. Now the hole that was here, I'm going to guess they must have put a peg or a screw in. After the glue dried, they pulled it out and filled it with putty. Doesn't make sense to me. So anyway, now I do have the pendulums on, and it doesn't tick. Well, it ticked for a short while, and what I need to do is level, or I guess we'll call it level, the pendulum so it'll keep ticking. And what I'm going to have to do is bend the wire down or up in order to keep this thing going. And it's kind of hard with one hand. Yes, you need to, or yes, I need to get me a clock stand, so this will be much easier to do. I'm going to have to set this down. So I think the girl needs to be bent down just a little further, and I'll find out quickly by whether it runs better or worse. That runs worse. Now it's broke. So I was having a problem with the clock ticking, and somehow or another the wire got bent. And so on this type of a clock, you don't necessarily have to worry about leveling it too much this way. Like I say, you can normally tip it either way and it'll still tick. So now I'll put the bellows in again. So that's my double pendulum clock. Now behind the scenes, I will admit, this is a very hard clock to get the timing set on the pendulum. My first problem was I do believe, spot welded the wire that goes across, that moves back and forth inside the clock to make it tick. as soon as I touched the one side, it broke off. And finally it got to be where I just took the other side off. I used bellow lift wire and made a new one so it'd be solid all the way across again, soldered it on, and of course solder doesn't like to stick to some things. I was able to get it wrapped, the solder wrapped around it, and super glued it in its spot. That's the best I could do. I got the clock finally ticking so it sounds even now, and so what's left to do now is going to take some time, is to watch the clock, make sure the timing's right, and if it's not, I'm going to have to adjust the two people either up or down, depending on whether I need to speed the clock up or slow it down. Anyway, as you can see, this clock does have some good value, mainly because it's the double pendulum and you don't see them that often. It's not the antique version that you've seen in the pictures that I've shown earlier in this video. And so I'm happy just to have one. That's all I can say on that. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe because it's free. And until next time, God bless.